Good evening. I'm Dr. Darlene Rossetti, the Regional Superintendent of DuPage County Schools. Tonight is the fourth in a series of not just surviving, but thriving in a crisis. And we are delighted to have Dr. Nancy Zarse back with us this evening. As this week is Teacher Appreciation Week, the partnership of District 41, the DuPage ROE, and Forensic Law Firm wants to devote this session to you, the educators. To you, all the teachers, the staff, administrators in our schools, for all that you are doing, your dedication, your caring, your passion, your expertise that you provide every day, and even more important during this crisis that we are in. You are our inspiration, and it truly is an honor to work alongside each and every one of you. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over now to Forensic Law Firm, Dana Fattori-Cumley. Dana?
Thank you, Darlene. We're so proud to sponsor this evening with Dr. Zarse. Everyone at the firm is just such a fan of her, first of all, but we also join in Darlene in really wanting to support all of our education clients, whether it be K through 12, higher ed, all the teachers, all the administrators, all the related service personnel who are doing so much for all of our students during this time in Illinois. Sponsoring this is just one small thing that we can do to show our appreciation for you, both as your colleagues and your partners in education, and for most of our attorneys as parents as well. So thank you so much, teachers, for everything you do. And I want to turn it over to Melissa finally to add something, who started this whole idea.
Thank you, Dana. Again, I would like to thank the Regional Office of Education and our partners in Forensic Law Firm for helping us host these events. Most of all, I'd like to thank Nancy. Before I turn it over to her, though, I would like to just express on behalf of everyone in District 41 our genuine appreciation to acknowledge and celebrate the work that's happening during what we're referring to as remote learning. A few short weeks ago, nobody knew what remote learning was, and I think we're still discovering that as each week goes on. But for our frontline workers, our teachers, and our building administrators, you represent hope and care and a sense of belonging for your students and for their families. Please know that we see the work that it takes to pull this off, even though maybe the general public doesn't realize what it takes to do this, and also care for your own families. We recognize it and we see it. So on behalf of everyone in District 41, thank you for that. And we hope this is a little kind of shot in the arm and a boost of some self-care to help us navigate between now and the remainder of this school year. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Zarse.
Did Mike want to say anything?
Yeah, let me cut in quickly before we begin. I just want to thank everyone for viewing this live stream. It is being recorded and will be available on both the DuPage ROE and the District 41 YouTube channels. If you have any questions throughout the live stream or even after this session, you may email us at dupagestrong@dupageroe.org. That's dupagestrong@dupageroe.org. We will be compiling questions throughout this segment into categories tonight for answering at the end. Please remember that your exact question may or may not be answered depending upon the unique nature of the question or perhaps for confidentiality reasons. We will be answering all questions received tonight, either live or at the conclusion of this live stream. Now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Zarse.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say that I am honored to be a part of this. I think what Glen Ellen District 41 is doing, what DuPage ROE is doing, and what Forensic Law Firm is doing is just stupendous. I think that it is such a sign of an acknowledgement of the crisis that is facing all of us, but also a way this whole series, not just tonight, this whole series has been a way of saying that they hear you, that they are concerned, and that they want to support you as you support the community and our students. And so I just want to say I'm just thrilled to be a part of this, to be a piece of a cog in this wheel. Okay, so what we're talking about tonight is self-care and emotional well-being. And right off the bat, I want you to look at the visual on the screen for those people who are looking at this, because I find these kind of visuals to be very encouraging. None not a single one of us on this platform are going to be able to utilize all of these strategies. And we're not going to like all of the strategies. They're not going to resonate with us. And to me, the beauty of having a number of options is that you get to choose. This one works for me. That one really does not. And I want that to be part of what colors our attention tonight, is that this is about options. This is about how you can take care of you before you turn around and take care of other people. So this is who I am. I don't think we've spent enough time on this. And I think maybe we ought to go into this in great detail tonight about who I am and what I bring to the table, or not. Okay, so I want to start, as I was really thinking through what I want to cover tonight, I thought, let's back it up a smidge and let's think about the general stress that teachers experienced, or educators, as Darlene says, that we experienced before the global pandemic. And another note that I want to add is that we're talking tonight about teachers, and certainly we commend all of what you do. But for anybody else who's with us tonight, you can take teacher out of a lot of these concepts and apply it to all of us, regardless of your profession, or even those of us who, those people who might be full-time stay-at-home folks. So pre-COVID-19, teachers were already feeling a higher level of stress. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that, because this global pandemic was layered on top of the stress that we were already feeling. And that stress impacts our health, physical and emotional, and it impacts our well-being. And so sometimes what that can lead to is burnout, or poor performance, or turnover rates that are increasing, or a reduced quality of education and thus student learning. And again, for those of you who can see the screen, I want you to look at this visual, because sometimes we underestimate, well, I'm not really working at 100%, but it's no big deal. And I think this picture really helps to capture what happens as we start to operate at less and less of our maximum capacity. And we start getting closer and closer to just kind of crawling and or collapsing on the floor. And if you think about that, if I'm at the point that I'm now crawling, I'm barely making it through my day, what kind of performance am I giving in my job? And so that's part of what we're trying to get at tonight. Now, there's this concept, and I'm sure you all know this far better than I, but there's some research out there on the social and emotional competence of teachers. And what the research shows is that there's 5 primary competencies. But again, look at this list, take teacher out of the equation, put in social emotional competence for any of us. It starts with self-awareness, and then self-management, and then social awareness, and then relationship skills, and then responsible decision-making. So if any of us sit with those 5 concepts, I think already we could start to think where maybe we're struggling a little bit during this crisis, or maybe even where we might have been struggling before. But what we know with regards to teachers is that the stress that a teacher feels has a direct negative impact on the well-being of students. So it really is a cycle, because later on we're going to talk about how students can impact teachers, how parents can impact all of this. So I want us to think about this as a cycle, but the more stress I feel, the more it's going to have a negative impact on whoever it is that I'm interacting with. And let's look at the social emotional capacity of teachers and their psychological well-being, both of which concepts are absolutely critical to strong performance. And they underlie the social and emotional learning practices that are taking place in the classroom. So the less stress I'm feeling, the more social emotional capacity, the better I'm going to be able to practice in my classroom. And that's going to come out in sensitivity, in responsiveness to student issues or parent issues, in the emotional support that we are able to provide. And again, you look at the psychological well-being and think about all of the arrows that flow from that core sense of my psychological well-being. And how does that impact so many other areas of my life, including my work performance? Then let's look at the concept of psychological load. So psychological load includes depressive symptoms, not necessarily diagnostic, not clinical depression that you're being diagnosed with, but are you carrying some of those symptoms of depression? What is your general stress level? And what's your basic job related emotional exhaustion? Look at the picture here again. If you're feeling weighted down and we're kind of starting to almost physically hunch with the sense of that weight, how much am I able to respond in my classroom? And so that psychological load impacts my responsiveness to negative emotions and my ability to engage professionally. Because if you think about it, we spend a lot of our days being impacted by other people's negative emotions. And so my psychological load has a tremendous impact on how well I'm able to deal with those other negative emotions. And think about any day of your life. When you're in a bad mood, you have less tolerance for other people's anger or their frustrations or their sadness or their bitterness. Think about any of us who are parents. If we're having a bad day, how do we handle the toddler? How do we handle the teenager who almost by definition is probably resisting boundaries and being disrespectful? And our psychological load has an impact on all of that. And what the research shows is that when we're more satisfied with our working conditions, we feel less job stress, and that leads to less burnout. Now, interestingly, I found this whole area of work on the impact of the chaos of childcare on the psychological well-being of teachers. So break that down. Childcare doesn't just mean, am I putting my child in a daycare facility? Childcare is whatever kind of care that child is receiving at home, in the daycare, wherever that child resides. And when there's chaos there, that impacts the psychological well-being of teachers. Remember the cycle. Teachers impact students. Students impact teachers. And we know that if there's a sense of chaos in the home setting, that those adults display some psychological difficulties. So think about how many teachers are also parents. What's going on in your home impacts you once you get to work. Now, by the same token, even if it's not your home, if it's somebody else's home and there's chaos there, that spills over into your classroom. And we also see in the research, and you guys just know it intuitively, you don't need me to quote research to you, but it's nice to be vindicated, isn't it? That if there's higher level of chaos in that home, it also impacts how compliant children are. So think about some of the students who are not following your directions. We tend to get isolated and think that's just about the classroom and that particular student and our effectiveness as a teacher. And we don't sometimes think about what's going on at home. What's that child carrying with them? And I thought about the movie Mr. Mom. It's kind of dated, but it's an absolute classic. Look at that kitchen scene and look at everything that's going on in that kitchen. And how engaged are those students, those little guys, going to be then when they walk into that classroom? It's why we want that relationship with our parents, so that parents will call us and say, hey, this is going on in the home. The father is deployed to the military, or we're going through a divorce, or we just lost our job and the finances are pretty tense in this house. You as teachers, once you have that information, it can impact the way that you then look at that child who's misbehaving. So think about all of that, and then think about this current crisis. And think about the chaos that a lot of people are experiencing in their homes. And how is that spilling over into your remote learning environment, which of course impacts you even if through a screen. Okay, now interestingly enough, and this is something that's not just about teachers, studies show that salary is not the most significant indicator about a teacher's well-being. Now, don't get me wrong. Any of us would like to make more money, and any of us are probably somewhat envious of the people in our lives who make more money, but salary is not the kicker. And I do a lot of work with legal aid attorneys, and the same thing applies there. Salary is not the most pivotal piece, but their perception, teachers' perceptions of work environment has a greater impact on turnover. Isn't that interesting? And for our administrators on the phone, I'm sorry, on the platform, for our administrators, we think, oh, somebody is dissatisfied. Can we give them a raise? Can we give them a bonus? And certainly none of us are going to say no to that. But the studies show that that doesn't necessarily have the greatest impact, as for instance, appreciation, or maybe more of a recognition type of award, or the overall culture and morale in that work environment. All of these results highlight the need to address teacher self-efficacy and or the work environment to support the social and emotional competence of our educators. Now, take all of that and now put on top of it the remote learning and the stress that teachers are now feeling during this remote environment is consistent with the previous findings. And what we see is that the distance learning simply amplifies the importance of your emotional well-being, because that's what we want to keep focusing on. We don't have any control over the crisis. That external control we do not have, but you still have control over your emotional well-being. And with all of that being said, hence this session. And I really want you to think about how to be good to yourself. That sounds kind of goofy. I'm making a lot of goofy statements tonight, but that's one of them. Okay, so now let's look at self-care. That was a bit of an introduction, wasn't it? When I talk about self-care with people, I'm a psychologist, and so people kind of minimize that. It feels less than. Maybe it feels frivolous, like I don't really have time for self-care. Or maybe it feels like that means that I'm needy or that I'm weak. And so we think to ourselves, we can't look at self-care that's not legitimate, and I certainly can't talk about it. So again, kudos to the administration at District 41 and at DuPage ROE and Frantic Law Firm for sponsoring a session that is absolutely focused on self-care and emotional well-being. Because think about that warning we get on the airplanes. If you're a parent, what do they say? Put on your own mask before you put on the mask of the child sitting next to you. We must tend to ourselves in order to tend to other people. And as a part of that, we need to take an active role in protecting our own well-being. And I love this quote: those who think they have not the time for bodily exercise will sooner or later have to make time for illness. So think about that during this crisis. Are you being good about taking some breaks and doing some exercise? We're seeing those commercials of people lifting tables in their apartment and lifting up their child and doing little laps around. I don't have that kind of a lap, but doing laps. I know one of my friends who's counting steps is able to do a lap around her apartment, and then she goes up and down her, in her place. So how can you be creative in making sure that we do still do some kind of physical activity, even if it's just a little bit? Now, why? Why does self-care matter? Why are we taking the time with this? And quite frankly, why is your administration sponsoring this? Because if we don't take care of self-care, then it leads to vulnerability. It leads to a loss of objectivity. It leads to impaired judgment, and it leads to boundary violations. And pick apart any one of those. I'm more vulnerable to criticisms if I'm not taking care of myself. I might start losing objectivity and perspective during this particular crisis. I may start making poor judgments. Maybe I'm snapping at people. Maybe I'm being disrespectful to my administration. Maybe I'm not allowing for some compassion with the students that I'm teaching. And then the boundary violations. There's all sorts of those. Maybe less during this time, but if you think of even inappropriate sexual behavior between maybe a teacher and a student, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here, and the absolute importance of self-care to protect against that. And the risk of not attending to self-care, it starts at the lowest level with simply distress. And then it goes to burnout. And then maybe it goes to vicarious traumatization. Maybe I'm taking on too much the trauma of the people that I'm surrounded with, my students, the parents, those of us, the special needs people do we know anybody in our lives who has COVID-19? And how are we handling all of that. Maybe we're making errors in judgment. And maybe once we've made that error in judgment, we're not quite sure how to come back from it. That too can be a part of self-care, because when I'm feeling better about myself and when I have a little bit of confidence and I can allow for the fact that I am flawed, I am imperfect, I can then own my mistakes. And I can say, I dropped the ball on that. Or, you know what, I was irritable with you and I apologize. Those are the kinds of things. All of that is a part and parcel of self-care. It can also be that we fail to meet our legal and or ethical obligations. And that can lead to complaints. It can lead to disciplinary action, maybe even some kind of legal liability. Now you might be thinking, well, I think that seems a little bit extreme. No, it all flows out of not attending to self-care. Okay, now this is the stress continuum. Now, again, this is very important material and I take it very seriously, but I would like us to take a moment to look at this because I made this my own self. And you are looking at literally several hours, I'm not joking, to make this. I am not tech savvy. But what this shows, and this is kind of the way most of us envision stress. We think that stress as a continuum starts with the stress, which leads to distress, which can lead to impairment, which can then lead to poor behavior. So if we think of those errors and judgments or possible boundary violations, that all starts with stress. So I want you to put that together. This is the way most people envision a stress continuum. What I want to point out to you is that that has limitations because it focuses on the negative. Do you notice if we go back, we only went from stress to poor behavior. We only went in a negative direction from green, which is go, to red, which is problem. And it doesn't envision the positive effects of stress. You might be thinking to yourself, whoa, I think you went a little bit too far on that one. Well, think about yourself. If you have a deadline and you have a project that is due 2 weeks out, do you work on that project immediately? Are you that kind of person that you jump in there and as soon as that is due, you are working on that? Or are you a little bit, I like to say, deadline driven? I'm not saying that I procrastinate. Of course I do not. But I will confess that I am deadline driven. I tend to wait till a little bit closer to that deadline. Now, is it because I'm busy? I am, sure. Or is it also because I have learned over time that I need a little bit of stress to be at my optimal capacity? In fact, I've been watching that Comedians in Cars Drinking Coffee with Jerry Seinfeld, and he was interviewing Eddie Murphy, two classic comedians. And they were both talking about the fact that if they go on stage and they feel too comfortable, they bomb. They need to have a little bit of nervousness and they don't mind that. And it's funny, so do I. I get tense every single time I speak. And people say to me, oh, you should be over that by now, which of course is a thinking error. But you know what? It doesn't bother me. The stress helps me perform at an optimal level. So let's look at stress as a somewhat positive thing. And here we have a comprehensive stress continuum. Now, if the last stress continuum took me several hours to build, how many hours do you think is represented in this one slide? Okay, we are looking at close to 5 to 6 hours just on these two slides alone. But look at this as now stress isn't on the left part of our continuum and we only go to the negative. Stress is actually in the middle of our continuum. And you can go towards surviving and flourishing, or you can go towards distress, impairment, and poor behavior. So when we look at our current crisis, we don't only have bad directions to go, we can also flourish under this. So my story tonight, I like to have a case. I like to have a story that we talk about. Tonight, it's Nelson Mandela. And so the good thing is you'll probably feel a little bit less nervous about this because you know the outcome of Nelson Mandela. But think about this man. Here was a man that was in captivity for 27 years. And during that time, the poem that inspired him was not negative. It was not bitter. It was not revenge driven. His poem that inspired him was Invictus. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. I'm telling you, think about everything we've talked about in this series. And after 27 years let's focus on that again, 27 years of captivity. When he was released, he ascended the political ladder in South Africa and became the president, a black man, of South Africa, a country that was synonymous with apartheid and with institutionalized racial discrimination against blacks. And as president, he refused to be embittered. He refused to seek injustice. He refused to seek revenge or to implement policies that were now discriminatory against white people, the very white people that had been discriminatory against he as a black man. He refused. That's not where he went. He fought for equality for all. And his quote was, "To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enforces the freedom of others." Oh my gosh. Think about everything we have learned in this series. Think about an internal locus of control. That quote, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." I'm not sure there's a single quote that more embodies an internal locus of control. Think about optimism. This was a man who continued to be optimistic about the future, who had a realistic sense of the unpleasantness of his current circumstances, but continued to have hope in tomorrow. And when that tomorrow came, he put that optimism to work for the good of the country. Think about managing emotions. Okay, I don't know that I would have been quite this evolved. Here was a man that managed to rise above his anger, that managed to rise above not only his own probable thoughts of revenge, but the influence of the people around him who actively encouraged him to seek revenge on the white people who had been so discriminatory towards them. And now, think about post-traumatic growth, because that's actually what flourishing under stress is about. Post-traumatic growth, where you emerge from that stress with a greater sense of mastery, with a heightened self-esteem, and with a stronger ability to cope. So let's go back. We don't have to just look at stress as only leading to the negative. We can look at stress as leading to a stronger ability to cope. And that's Nelson Mandela embodies all of that. And okay, yes, maybe you've picked up on the fact that I like movies. Invictus. I watched this movie this sounds goofy. How many goofy things am I going to talk about tonight? I watched this movie over the weekend. It to me is so inspiring, but part of what is inspiring is the humanity. And I love his other quote up there. It always seems impossible until it is done. Think about remote learning. If you'd have talked to any of us educators 6 months ago and you would have said, we're going to go completely distant in our learning, we would have said, it can't be done. We can't do it. And it seemed impossible then until now when we're actually doing it. And I also love that final quote when he said, "Do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." Anybody remember Jeff Patterson, the firefighter from Dallas Fire and Rescue, who actually said that his definition of strength was getting back up after he was knocked down? I find these people inspiring. They're human, they're flawed, they're imperfect. They stumble, they fall, and they get back up. And that's what any of us can be doing during this crisis. We're all going to stumble. We're going to have bad days. We're going to lose our temper. We're going to be irritable and impatient. Can we own it? Can we recover? Okay, so here is the self-care cycle. Okay, how many hours do you think is on this side? Are you starting to get a sense of things here? Okay, and how poor I am technologically. So self-care, I want you to think of this too as a cycle. So it starts with self-awareness. Do I have a healthy sense of realistic notion of myself, my strengths and my weaknesses? Then comes the self-assessment. So how am I doing right now? Where are my strengths and weaknesses right now? I have to continue to monitor myself, but in the middle is the pivotal piece. It's not just, hi, my name is Bob and I'm an alcoholic. That is step 1 of 12. In the middle comes the responding to needs. So as I am aware and as I am assessing, then am I responding to that? So let's spend a little bit of time there. The warning signs that tell us that we need to increase our self-care? If we're ignoring signs of distress, what are people telling you? What's the messages that you're hearing from other people? Are you hearing you're looking pretty bad, you're not having a good day, you look like you're running on empty? Are you responding to that and assessing yourself with regards to that? What are the physical signs? Do you have disturbed sleep? Do you have disturbed eating or disturbed concentration? Do you have physical signs like headaches and stomach aches? Pay attention. That's our body giving us signs, giving us messages. Now, I've also been reading quite a bit that quite a few of us are heading towards the refrigerator a little bit more than we typically do when we're at work. They've actually started, I heard somebody today call it the COVID-15, that we're all gaining extra weight and that we're all going to emerge from this with a little bit extra padding. So, okay, don't stress about that, but do pay attention. Are you not eating enough? Are you saying that I don't even have time for food? If you're not nourishing your body, how are you nourishing your psyche? Pay attention to emotional signs like sadness. Now, yes, we are in a crisis and we have lost a tremendous amount in this crisis. And the longer that these stay-at-home orders get extended, the more we are losing things. So let's own that. Let's acknowledge that. Are you overworking? Is there a sense that because you're at home that you're not walking away from your job? I heard one of the administrators make a comment about these lines before we got on the phone, before the rest of you joined us here tonight. So this is something that all of us need to look at. Where are we having, because we're overworking, are we less enjoying of our work? Are we bored? Are we disinterested? Are we irritable? I'm not sure that I know anybody that right now is going through the crisis that is not somewhat irritable at times. So that's one that I think we really kind of need to keep a watch on. Are we self-medicating? Are you overtaking prescription pills? Are you overtaking alcohol? I was a little bit concerned when so early on alcohol got deemed as an essential item. It makes me a little bit nervous. So maintain some moderation there. Are you using illegal drugs? So pay attention to how you might be self-medicating and then think what is going on underneath the self-medication. Are you violating boundaries? Are you looking to people to fulfill your needs that are not appropriate to be doing that? Now, let's keep going around the cycle. What is self-care? What does effective self-care look like? Are you replenishing and are you nourishing? So I love the picture. I love my gardens. So now that spring is coming, I spend a lot of time trying to, well, around my physical disabilities, but as much as I can, that is a way that I nourish. And so it's also a concept that I can get. We need to nourish flowers before they flourish and bloom. Same thing with us. We need to be nourished in order to bloom. Are you deliberate in your self-care? Do you have a plan in your mind? I'm going to exercise 10 minutes a day. I'm going to exercise 20 minutes a day. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to disconnect from the computer and my phone, and I'm going to read a fun book. I'm going to watch movies. I have a recommendation for you. How about Invictus or any of the other movies we've talked about? They're focusing on concepts that we are dealing with right now. Is whatever you're doing sustainable? You know, the reason that the gyms give those great deals on New Year's Day is because so many people buy those gym memberships and then they don't sustain it. So come up with something that is realistic for you so that it's better to do something small, one or two things, and sustain them than to start out, I'm going to do 10 things and you're going to give up on all of them. Is there a way that you can integrate this into your daily life? Is there a way that you can figure out how to exercise, or you can figure out how to meditate, or you can figure out how to read or watch a fun movie or a clip? Comedians in cars drinking coffee, Jerry Seinfeld and Eddie Murphy. But is there a way that you can integrate that into your daily life, which also means it can't be huge? You can't tell yourself I'm going to spend 3 hours a day on self-care. That's just not sustainable, and it's not able to be integrated into our daily life right now. And then, is it both comprehensive, but also flexible? Because you're going to need multiple strategies. It's going to evolve over time. A lot of us were talking about, before the rest of you joined us on this platform, that the extension of the stay-at-home order into May hit a lot of us pretty hard. So now we need to use different strategies, or we need to implement a couple of strategies to handle the fact that we're feeling a little bit more stressed. So that's what I'm talking about, comprehensive and flexible. And no matter what your routine is, there's going to be days that you're just not going to feel like it. Okay. Don't tell yourself you're going to exercise 7 days a week. Tell yourself you're going to exercise 5 days a week. Build in a day that you just want to chill or a day that you don't feel well enough to do it. And know that during times of intensity, it's kind of counterintuitive. You need to actually increase your self-care. So even though you feel like you have more that you have to do, and so you have less time, and so you're going to put yourself on the back burner, I encourage you to actually increase your self-care and apply self-compassion. We're going to have bad days. We're going to be irritable. We're going to lose our patience. We're going to feel really self-conscious about the fact that we're having to teach remotely, and who else in that house is watching us? You know, I'm also a professor. I'm a forensic psychologist and I'm a professor. And as I'm teaching my students, I see their family members walking by blatantly. A couple of them now actually say, "Hey, Dr. Z," are you kidding me? Are we not even pretending that this is private? So apply some self-compassion that's tough. I like teaching my classroom. I don't like thinking about who the nameless, faceless people are in the living rooms who might be a little bit more critical of me than the seventh grader was. And allow for your humanity. We are all going to make mistakes. We are all flawed and imperfect people. And if your sense of compassion only applies to other people, it is incomplete. Compassion does need to apply to ourselves. So here are a couple of strategies. Refocus on rewards. And don't just think rewards are a drink or rewards are food. Think about the other ways you can reward yourself. Can you read a book? Can you meditate? Can you do some exercise? Can you watch a movie? So think about what it is that feels like a reward for you. Be realistic about the professional hazards. You know, there are certain things that are just part and parcel of our jobs, especially in this new reality. So what are those? It can be realistic. Tend to your body. You know, when we're sitting at a computer, we're hunched. It's affecting our spine. It's affecting our shoulders. So are you taking time to stretch, to walk? Are you taking a 5 or 10-minute break every hour where you get up out of your chair? And don't get me wrong, I'm not great at this myself. So again, be realistic. Maybe we need to set alarms. Rather than just hope that I'm going to notice, what catches up to me is my pain. When my pain starts to get more intense, I realize, oh, I need to get up. But whatever it is, find a way from you to avoid depletion. And then nurture relationships, both inside and outside of work. And periodically, we need to assess those relationships. Are they still working? Are they still healthy? Do they still make us feel good about ourselves? And if not, how can we readjust to find more balance in that relationship and set boundaries? Personally and professionally, there are times that we need to walk away from work. There are times that no is the appropriate answer. Can you do? No, thank you. No, my sister-in-law did not believe in saying the word no. As a mother, that's the word that you say the most. So her word was no, thank you. I still say that. It's turned into a noun for me. Oh, that's a no, thank you. So think about that concept. Sometimes no is the appropriate response. And then the strategies, as we continue with this thought of what are the strategies, restructure your cognitions. You are not responsible for everything that is happening in your students' lives. We're not responsible for everything that is happening in society around us. So do not take on more responsibility than is appropriate. By the same token, do not what we call catastrophicize, where we think it's going to be a catastrophe. If anybody is close to my age, remember the show Gulliver's Travels? There was always that guy that would say, "We're doomed. I just know it. We're doomed." We're not doomed. We're going to get through this. There is light at the end of this tunnel. We are going to adapt to this crisis. It is not going to be the end of Western civilization as we know it. So you don't want to go to the extremes that it's all horrible. It's not all horrible. Let's maintain a little bit of perspective. Sustain your healthy escapes. What can you do to create a thriving environment? Me personally, I'm very personal. I miss hugs. So one of the things I have done just right here in my own little office space is I now have a lot more pictures of my family and my friends, because it's a way of kind of making me feel Like I am still in an environment that's about people and about relationships and about people that support and love me. So I am creating my own thriving environment. And again, that might be goofy. That might not be what it is for you. So figure out what the strategies are for you. Cultivate your spirituality. This is a time to get back in touch with God, especially if you are a believer. So get back in touch with your faith, even if it's remote, and foster that creativity and growth. How can you work not just on the negative side of the stress continuum, but how can you push yourself towards the positive side of the stress continuum? Here are some additional considerations. What have you already done? What strategies have you already implemented? What needs to be strengthened? Where might be a gap in your self-care routine? And then what needs to be outright created? Start small. Remember, we want it to be sustainable. We want it to be realistic. We want it to be implemented and be able to be integrated into your life. And know that this is going to change. It's going to change over time. I'm going to have to be flexible. I'm going to have to modify. Remember the plan A, and then we've got plan B. A lot of us are in the plan B category. We're moving on to plan C and plan D and plan E. But adapt as the situation goes. But mostly remember that we truly are all in this together. We all have a common humanity. We are all flawed and imperfect, and we are all trying to do the best we can in a crisis that just happens to be an extended crisis. So be kind while we're being safe and adjust to the current reality. Acknowledge your feelings. We are losing a lot. We are not necessarily happy with what we need to do to stay safe. So acknowledge that and take those deep breaths that we've talked about in previous sessions. It is a fabulous breathing exercise. It is free, it is easy, and it is something that you can integrate easily into your day. I'm going to say try to avoid criticizing others. And by the same token, try to avoid criticizing yourself. Take those breaks, maintain a schedule. Can you be physical now that the weather is turning? Can you get outside? Can you open a window? Can you get on a deck? Can you get on a fire escape? Can you get on a driveway safely? Social distancing. We remember that we are in control of a great many aspects of our lives. So rather than focusing quite as much on what we're not in control over, let's focus on what we are in control over. And while we're doing that, take it easy on yourself. Listen to that Eagles song. Take it easy on yourself. Temper your expectations. Again, we're human. We're going to make mistakes. This might not be our best unless, of course, we can push ourselves into the positive end of stress. And try not to bemoan too much what's behind us, what used to be, what we lost. Rather than focusing on that, which puts us more on the negative side of the stress, can we focus any on the positive side? Because with all of it, throughout every single day and every single hour, this too shall pass. We're not sure when, and boy, don't we want to be in control of that information? Don't we want to know definitively it's going to pass tomorrow? No, but know that it will pass. And then think again. So if we go back to this slide, take it easy on yourself, avoid criticizing others. I want to focus just a second on your self-talk. What do you say to yourself? What are the messages in your head? If you trip, do you say, oh, you're such an idiot? If you drop something, like what are the messages in your head? And examine those. Odds are good there, especially focus on the ones that are inaccurate or unkind. And can we replace it with some sense of gentleness? I love the Pink song. Change the voices in your head, make them like you instead. I want you to focus on that just tonight, because I'll almost guarantee you that before the night is over, you're going to make some silly little mistake. And what is the message that you're going to say? Oh, you are such an idiot. I can't believe that you are such a failure. What are you saying to yourself? And almost any talk that starts with should, which you'll hear me say over and over again, is a thinking error, but also always and never, which are absolutes. Let's just try to avoid the thinking errors and avoid the absolutes, because there's very little that I always do. There's very little that I never do. So think about that. Change the voices in your head and make them like you instead. And as we look at these tough times, and they are, let's own it. Let's not pretend we are in a crisis. So can we approach it with a positive mindset? Can we approach it with the attitude that we are going to adapt and we'll get through it? But along the way, prioritize both your physical and your mental health. I am a psychologist. You had to expect me to say that. And utilize your support network. Even though it's remote, call people, set up the Zoom personal calls, set up FaceTime. You know, it's funny. Before this, I never allowed myself to even be on camera. I would literally tell people my camera's broken, or my laptop just doesn't even have a camera. I'm not sure who bought that, but I refused. I had never FaceTimed once until this global pandemic. So, but now I am a very social being. So I need to utilize my support network, and I still need to feel like we are together and we're seeing the faces, the sarcasm, the pauses, the hesitation, the emotion, the unfinished sentences. Utilize your support network. The emotional intelligence, I'm going to go through kind of quickly. You guys all know this, you teach this, but remember, one of the pivotal things is to recognize and to manage your emotions. And yes, you have heard me talk about this in almost every single session of this series, because our emotions drive our behavior negatively or positively. So the more aware you are of acting on your emotions, the more positive are going to be your behaviors. And sometimes you might not catch it in yourself. I had somebody recently say to me, call me up. It was a graduate of mine and was hearing a decision I was getting ready to make. And she calls me up and she says, you know, Dr. Z, I think it's possible. And you could tell her voice was getting all sensitive and soft. She said, you know, Dr. Z, I think it's possible that you're acting on your emotions. And I think you would tell us that we don't want to do that. Oh, using me against me? Oh, isn't that the worst? No, I want to use me against you. I don't want it used against me. But there it is. Great feedback. Okay, now I might still make that decision, but I'm going to take some time to try to understand what's driving my decisions, my behavior, and do I want to stand with that? Because it is going to take attention. As with any other skill that we develop, you have to devote the time and attention to this. And we do have the power to improve our emotional attention, to grow this skill set. Wouldn't that be a great outcome of this crisis? And to figure out the ways to use it to our advantage. Oh my gosh, before you guys joined us, we talked about Maslow's hierarchy. It came up in passing. Here it is. I want you to live your life by what is important to you. So yes, first, we absolutely have to attend to the physiological needs. We can't talk about math and science before we're talking about shelter and food. So we need to have that in there. But consciously, can you start then to build a way for you to climb up Maslow's hierarchy so that you can start to figure out, how can I feel a greater sense of belonging? What are my safety needs? Can I work on my self-esteem so that eventually, maybe not today, maybe not even tomorrow, maybe the day after, we can figure out how to be self-actualized and know that most of us are probably not going to be Nelson Mandela. But if we strive for perfection, we will hit excellence. So let's have that be our guide. And do not let adversity stop you. Let it fuel you. 27 years of captivity. And he came out determined to make an equal South Africa where he brought whites and blacks together. Let that adversity fuel you. And I'll tell you what, managing your emotions is a pivotal piece, because you want to make sure that you are not acting on anger and vindictiveness and bitterness, but rather you are acting on whatever values and beliefs fuel you. And all of you that are on this platform, whether you're teachers or whether you're other folks who are joining us here tonight, we want to rise to our greater self. And we want to, along the way, seek to improve other people's lives, not just our own. So how can we combine our heads and our hearts so that we can fuel that creativity that gets us through this as a community? Here's what I'm going to end on. The first is our aspiration. A good teacher can inspire the mind and ignite the imagination and instill a love of learning. And those of you who are on this platform, that's what you are doing. You are instilling a lifelong love of learning. But to get to that aspiration, we still need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, because self-care is about giving the best of you, not just what's left of you. So I want you to combine those two. I want you to get that self-care actually enables you to be a better educator, a better role model for your students, a better example for them of what they want to aspire to. I'm going to come back to the questions. Here's my contact information. Here are my references. I don't want you to think that I plagiarized anybody along the way, because I want us, you know how I love Churchill by this point. You make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give. And the more you take care of you, the better you are going to be able to give to other people. So there you go. I'm going to go back to questions. I'm only going to stay there so long because I really kind of like this slide better, but I'm going to let you know that it's time for questions. And I'm going to go to this slide. I'm going to come back to questions. If we don't have any questions, though, I'm going to bounce back to Maslow's hierarchy, because I am just so thrilled that somebody brought that up, and then there it was in the slide. Simpatico.
Okay,
Okay.
Mike, do you want to throw out a question, or do you have?
Sure. We are open for questions right now at DuPageStrong@DuPageROE.org. That's DuPageStrong@DuPageROE.org. Again, you can ask them now, or you can email us at any time, and we will respond with an answer at some point. I'd like to remind everyone also that this session is being recorded and archived on both the DuPage ROE and District 41 YouTube channels, along with a list of resources available that we hope will help. We do have one question. During exceptional times like trying to teach while schools are closed, how do you create realistic expectations for what you can accomplish?
I think the first step to that is you spend some time thinking about your own realistic expectations, and then you help manage that with your students. I'm a big believer in managing expectations. So once you have decided you're the educator, so you're taking the lead. Once you have decided what are realistic expectations, now let's pass them along and transmit them. Talk about it openly. I'm a huge believer in this is our goal, and I think we can get there. Or this piece right here, we might need to set aside, so let's manage that expectation. Now, it could be that, you know, I might be speaking out of line. That might be a question for you guys too, because it could be that some of that you need to coordinate with your superintendents and find out what they think are the realistic expectations. But once you do that brainstorming and set those priorities, now communicate it and come back to it, especially if it's an unpleasant expectation. If let's say, for instance, I teach advanced law enforcement this summer, and typically my students get to do a ride-along with police. Okay, well, odds are good we're not going to be able to do that this summer. So today was my first class of the summer semester. We're already in summer at my school, at my university. So one of the things I owned today was, I think there's a good chance we're not going to get that ride-along. Now I'm going to try to come up with some other things to do, some creative alternative substitutes for you guys, but I want to start managing now the expectation that I think there's a good chance we're going to lose that. Because I don't want to come in 6 weeks from now and say, it's gone, without any prep work along the way. Administrators, do you guys have any thoughts?
You know, yeah, Nancy, it was actually a question that I was going to ask, but I think what we've noticed during the course of e-learning and now remote learning is that families' needs are so vastly different that there's always somebody upset. So, you know, I think that's what's adding to the stress of just having to work differently for teachers, is that at no point in time do they feel like they have all students engaged and all families happy. And I think that's very different environment for teachers and a level of stress. I know it is for us as well. What I've suggested to people is don't make promises that you can't keep.
Absolutely.
So if a parent is asking you for something that you know you cannot do, or if they ask me for something that I know we can't deliver on, I will be honest and say, well, we can't do that, or I can't promise that, but we can do this. But, I guess any ideas on strategies for teachers and building level administrators who I think are in the middle of a period of time where they just feel like it's impossible to make everybody happy. We have families begging for less. We can't do anymore. We can't keep up with what we have. And then we have people demanding rigor and all kinds of other stuff layered on. And so trying to take the middle road means no one's happy. So, and I think that's a really defeating kind of feeling that they're existing with every day.
And I hear that, and I think that that is so. A couple of things. One, let's own that. Again, I think there's tremendous value in acknowledging our feelings, in acknowledging our emotions. That is frustrating. That is hard. On the other hand, I don't know that teachers ever thought that everybody was happy before this.
Right.
I don't know that teachers thought that all students were happy, that all parents were happy, and that they could meet all of those needs. So again, let's put this in perspective. This crisis, to some extent, is amplifying what was already going on. And I think that to some extent, that's life. You are never going to make everybody happy. So if we come back to managing expectations, so I know that I'm not going to make everybody happy. I do some pretty accurate assessing of what are realistic expectations. Maybe I bounce that off my administrator. This is what I'm thinking. Are you cool with that? Yes, you've got my blessing. Okay, now I go forward. I would like you to get to the point that you feel confident that you are the subject matter expert, and you are moving forward with your plan, and it's a solid plan. Now, it'll adapt, it'll flex, but on the other hand, know that I don't know anybody that makes everybody happy all the time. Those are absolutes. It's just not going to happen.
And I think we have to be reminded of, we're getting guidance from, the Board of Education, roundtables of superintendents, certainly Darlene. You're bringing together a group of people. There's legal people, there's education experts, there's experts on child development. There's certain things that we can't do, and nobody is getting them. So it's like, I think a lot of times parents feel that it really is, why aren't I getting this? And they sometimes will say someone else is getting it. Right now, people are getting what we can manage in a creative, in a way that meets the needs of kids. And I think that, I even look at older kids, Nancy was talking about adults today. We can't be on Zoom 8 hours a day. Like, even if we put someone on Zoom 8 hours a day, even as adults, even if they would not retain all that information. So there's limits. And the reason that we are where we are is we're making informed decisions, being informed by all of these by parents who are saying, I can't do 3 hours a day with my student. What can I do every day? And it is just I think some of the guidance that you gave here, Nancy, about what's sustainable, what's manageable, how can you make positive changes? You're worried about reading? What's something we can put in that is 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, that will help us in that goal? So.
And I would add to that. This morning we had our social emotional learning roundtable, and we had one of our guest speakers on. And one of the things he said is that a lot of teachers, instructional coaches were on this, social workers, and he just basically said, most of our children are not going to remember that math lesson, but they're going to remember how you made them feel, how you connected to them. That's going to be the lesson here, down the road. And so, you focus on, when you talk about realistic expectations, that is a realistic expectation, is, you know what, let me connect to you. And that's what you've been saying, Nancy, as well too. You know what, you talked about having pictures of your family around you and doing all that. It's how we're connecting to each other. This is unprecedented times. I know we're overusing that word,
No,
but
we're not.
it's the
It is.
truth. Nothing is normal right now. Nothing feels normal. So it's okay. I mean, I tell folks, it's okay. Let's just connect on that, human being to human being. Whatever your needs are that day, let's try to do the best that we can.
And the more, so Darlene, I'm going to piggyback on that. The more you take care of yourself, the more you have that self-care, the more able you are to hear somebody saying, and you can just kind of calmly respond, not match emotion with emotion, and just calmly respond and say, to some extent, we're doing the best we can. To some extent, we're going to have to get through this, and we're going to make a plan today that we might have to adapt already by tomorrow. We're doing the best we can. We would like you to also do the best you can. And then us as teachers know you're not making anybody happy. You've got those overachievers that want you teaching them 8 hours a day. You have other people that would say, what are you talking about? We can't be on for 8 hours a day. So you guys make the informed, educated decisions. You are the subject matter experts. Get back in touch with the confidence of what you do and how prepared you are to do it. Feel good about that, and then you will be able to transmit that. Not in an ugly, aggressive kind of way, but just in a quiet, I'm here for you. I care. How can we adapt to these circumstances? And Darlene, I don't think we're overusing the word. These are unprecedented times. We will be talking to our children and our grandchildren about these times. Let's put that in perspective. So if we lose a mass lesson, and by the same token, don't catastrophize about that. We're already seeing stuff on the news. Are the children ever going to recover from this? Get over yourself. Are the children ever going to recover from this? As if somehow the students of today are permanently scarred by the fact that we're home for a couple of months. Come on. Think about the London Blitz. I mean, we will adapt. We will adapt. And if we find out that we're behind in something in the fall, I have every confidence that all of you on this platform are going to put your collective expertise together and you're going to figure out how to recalibrate. Let's maintain that expertise and let's maintain that confidence in yourselves. You got this. I probably got a little bit carried away there.
Okay, we have no further questions. I'd like to thank everyone for participating this evening. And if there are any other closing comments, let's go ahead and make them now.
I just want to thank you again, Nancy. I thought this was great. This was really great. Thank you for, just thank you for everything. And just one more time, I just want to thank all of the educators, not just here in DuPage County, but across this great nation, and for all that they're doing every single day. I really think in a lot of ways, they are the glue. They're the glue that's keeping a lot of things together. So I give them a great deal of credit.
Absolutely. Thanks to everybody.
And thanks to you guys for hosting this, for sponsoring this, and for saying to your teachers and your community, we hear you, we care, and we're all in this together. And I think that's what this series has all been about. My hat's off to you guys.
Thank you. Everyone have a good evening.